I used to believe that family was forever. When I was younger, nothing felt stronger than the bond I had with my relatives. Every birthday was crowded with laughter, every holiday alive with warmth. I grew up running through the hallways of my grandparents' house, playing with cousins, listening to uncles argue over politics and aunts sharing recipes in the kitchen. Those gatherings were the fabric of my childhood, and I wore them like a second skin. But the first signs of distance crept in quietly, almost too softly to notice. I brushed them off as misunderstandings, the natural drift that comes when people get older and busier. Yet now, looking back, I can see how it began. How one thread was pulled, then another, until the whole cloth unraveled and left me standing outside. It started with my cousin's graduation party. For weeks I heard the whispers, my aunts planning the menu, my uncle making jokes about speeches, my mother talking about what gift she might buy. I assumed, of course, that I was included. Why wouldn't I be? But the day of the event came and went, and I received no invitation, no call, not even a text message. The next morning, I opened social media and saw the photos. A smiling crowd, balloons, music, glasses raised in toast. My cousin grinned in cap and gown, surrounded by everyone but me. At first, I convinced myself it was an oversight. Surely someone had forgotten to send me the details. Families are messy, I thought. Wires get crossed. But when I asked my mother, her answer didn't comfort me. She sighed and said, "We thought you wouldn't want to come. You always seem uncomfortable at these things." Her words stung. I tried to protest, to explain that I did want to come, that I wanted nothing more than to be included. But she brushed me off with a distracted wave, as though my feelings were too trivial to matter. After that, the invitations became irregular. Sometimes I was told about gatherings at the very last minute, with no time to prepare. Other times I wasn't told at all. Each time it happened, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they assumed I was busy. Maybe they didn't want to bother me. Maybe it was just bad timing. But the truth became harder to ignore when I arrived at my grandparents' house one Easter. I had baked a cake and carried it carefully on the bus, proud to contribute to the celebration. But when I walked in, the table was already full, the plates already half empty, and laughter filled the room without me. I looked around for an empty seat, but there was none. My aunt glanced at me with surprise, as though I had shown up uninvited, and whispered something to my cousin. They quickly cleared a small space at the corner, gave me a chair that didn't match the rest, and handed me a plate almost as an afterthought. I sat there, the cake untouched on the counter, listening to conversations that didn't include me. It was the first time I felt like a guest in my own family. The worst blow came on Christmas Eve. For years, Christmas had been sacred. No matter what else happened, everyone gathered together. I still remember the glow of candles, the sound of carols, the sight of gifts piled under the tree. But that year, the call never came. I waited all day, telling myself they were just busy preparing. I left my phone on the table, glancing at it every few minutes. Midnight arrived, and silence filled the room. On Christmas morning, I saw the photos. My entire family was there. Parents, siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles. They smiled beside the tree, glasses raised, children unwrapping presents. And me, absent, erased, invisible. I didn't cry at first. I sat there numb, staring at the screen until my eyes blurred. Later, when the silence of my apartment pressed too heavily on my chest, I broke down. I wasn't just forgotten. I was excluded. From that moment, everything changed. Every holiday became a wound. Birthdays, weddings, anniversaries, events that once marked joy now reminded me of loss. When relatives posted photos online, I stopped looking at them. It was too painful to see their smiles, their closeness, the chairs at the table that no longer had room for me. I tried to confront them. Once, I asked my aunt directly why I wasn't invited to a cousin's baby shower. She looked away and said, "We kept it small, just family." The words hit me harder than a slap. Just family. As if I wasn't family anymore. I called my brother another time, asking why nobody told me about our uncle's retirement party. He sighed and said, "You always make things uncomfortable. It's easier this way." His voice was calm, practiced, as though he had repeated those words before. I wanted to argue, to scream that I had never done anything to deserve this, that all I had ever wanted was to belong. But I realized then that it didn't matter. They had already decided who I was to them, a complication, an outsider, a problem best left behind. The cruelest part wasn't the rejection itself. It was the way they pretended it wasn't happening. When I confronted them, they dismissed me as sensitive, dramatic, difficult. They turned the blame on me, making me feel guilty for wanting what should have been mine by right. A place at the table, a voice in the room, a space in their lives. For months, I wrestled with the question, why? Why had they chosen to cut me out? I searched through memories, dissecting every word I had spoken, every action I had taken. Had I offended someone without realizing it? Had I failed in some invisible test? But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find the answer. The truth was simple, cruel, and impossible to change. They no longer wanted me. So I stopped waiting for the calls. I stopped leaving my calendar open for events that would never include me. I tried to build new traditions, to create celebrations of my own. But the ache remained. Every holiday, every birthday, every anniversary reminded me of what I had lost, not just the events themselves, but the sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than myself. The world tells you that family is unconditional, that blood is stronger than anything. But my family taught me another lesson. Blood is meaningless without love. The more I tried to ignore the distance, the sharper it cut. At first, I thought maybe silence would heal it, that if I stayed quiet, if I didn't press too hard, they would remember me on their own. But silence only widened the gap. With every holiday that passed, I became more like a ghost in their lives. Someone mentioned occasionally, but never seen. The breaking point came during my cousin's wedding. I had grown up with her, spent summers playing in our grandparents' yard, whispering secrets under blankets during sleepovers. I was sure that whatever had changed between me and the rest of the family, she would still include me. Weeks passed and no invitation arrived. I told myself it must have been lost in the mail. But then I saw the seating chart posted online, a chalkboard decorated with flowers, names written in elegant calligraphy. Dozens of relatives, family friends, distant cousins I barely remembered. My name wasn't there. Still, I couldn't accept it. I messaged her, trying to sound casual. Hey, I just wanted to check. I didn't get an invitation. Maybe it got lost? She replied after a long pause. We had to keep it small, just immediate family. Immediate family. The words felt like ice. I was her cousin, part of the family that had shaped her childhood. Yet somehow I was now beyond the invisible boundary of what counted as immediate. On the day of the wedding, I walked the streets aimlessly, trying not to picture the white dress, the music, the laughter, the glasses clinking. My phone stayed silent. No one asked where I was. No one missed me. That was when I began to realize it wasn't just forgetfulness or bad communication. It was deliberate. They were building a circle and I was no longer inside it. I tried to speak with my mother again, hoping she might understand. Why am I being left out? I asked. Why don't they want me there? She sighed heavily, as if the very question exhausted her. You take everything too seriously, she said. It's better this way. Less tension. Less tension. The words echoed in my head. Did my presence really cause so much discomfort that it was easier to erase me altogether? I replayed memories, searching for moments when I might have offended them. But the truth was, I had done nothing. My only crime was existing in a way they didn't like. Too quiet, too sensitive, too unwilling to play the roles they wanted. The humiliation became public when my grandfather turned 80. The family rented a hall, decorated it with flowers and balloons, and gathered everyone together for a grand celebration. I only found out because a coworker who happened to know my cousin asked me if I was excited for the party. My stomach dropped. What party? I asked. That night, I dressed carefully, wrapped a blanket as a gift, and went to the hall. At the door, my cousin stopped me. We didn't expect you, he said awkwardly. It's kind of full inside. I held out the gift. I just want to give this to Grandpa. He hesitated, then took it, blocking the doorway with his body. Behind him, I saw tables crowded with relatives, music playing, glasses raised. There was even an empty chair near the door. But he didn't move. "It's probably better if you don't come in," he whispered. "We don't want to overwhelm him." I turned and walked away, the sound of laughter following me into the night. That was when the shame became unbearable. It wasn't just about missing the celebrations anymore. It was about being treated as though my presence was dangerous, as though I carried something toxic that might spoil their joy. For months afterward, I avoided social media. Every time I opened it, there were new photos of smiling faces, tables full of food, family traditions carrying on without me. My absence wasn't even mentioned. It was as though I had been erased from the family history altogether. I tried once more to reach out, this time to my brother. "Why does everyone treat me like a stranger?" I asked. His reply was cold, rehearsed. "Because you always make everything about you. It's exhausting. People just want to enjoy themselves without drama." Drama. That was the word they used to explain away my pain. To them, my desire to belong was nothing but trouble, a disruption to their carefully curated happiness. The irony was I never wanted to cause drama. All I wanted was to sit at the table, to share a meal, to laugh at the same jokes. But somehow that simple wish had become too much to ask. The holidays turned into the hardest days of the year. On Thanksgiving, I cooked a small meal for myself, the silence pressing down on me as I set a single plate at the table. On New Year's Eve, I stood by the window and watched fireworks explode across the sky, each burst a reminder of the celebrations I wasn't part of. On birthdays, I bought myself a cupcake, lit a candle, and whispered a wish into the empty room. Each time, the same thought returned. What did I do to deserve this? But eventually, another thought began to form. Maybe I don't need their permission to celebrate. Maybe I can create my own family, my own traditions. It wasn't easy. The ache of exclusion doesn't vanish overnight. It lingers, gnawing at the edges of your heart, whispering that you're unworthy. But slowly, I began to push back. I started inviting friends over for dinner on the nights when my relatives gathered without me. I lit candles, cooked food, and filled the room with laughter that was mine, not borrowed. I began to see that family isn't defined by blood alone. It's defined by love, by the people who choose you, who show up, who make space for you at their table. My relatives had chosen to shut me out, but that didn't mean I was alone forever. The pain still rises sometimes, especially during holidays when memories of childhood return. I still see the faces of my cousins, the glow of my grandparents' house, the warmth I once believed was unbreakable. But I remind myself that love cannot be forced. If they cannot see my value, that is their loss, not mine. And so I move forward. My relatives may treat me like a stranger, but I am not a stranger to myself. I know who I am, and I know I deserve more than a closed door. One day, maybe they will realize what they lost. Maybe they will look at the empty chair at their table and remember that it belonged to me. But until then, I will build my own table, with people who see me, who welcome me, who understand that family is not just blood. It is love, chosen and earned. Time passed, but the wound stayed open. Every new celebration without me felt like salt rubbed into it. The family didn't even try to hide their gatherings anymore. Photos appeared online almost instantly. Cousins raising glasses, uncles with their arms around each other, my parents smiling proudly at the head of the table. The captions always stung. Family first. Nothing is more important than family. So grateful for my loved ones. Loved ones. The words cut me deeper than silence ever could. I wanted to scream, if family comes first, why am I not there? If nothing is more important than family, why am I treated like nothing at all? But screaming wouldn't change anything. They had already made their choice. There were days when anger consumed me. I imagined storming into one of their gatherings, standing in the middle of the room, and shouting until they finally admitted the truth. That I had been pushed out, erased, discarded like an old coat that no longer fit. Other days, sadness crushed me so heavily that I could barely get out of bed. On those days, the silence of my apartment was deafening. No phone calls, no laughter, no voices of children running through the hallways like when I was young. Just the ticking of the clock and the steady reminder that I had been left behind. I tried to talk to my father once. We met for coffee in a small cafe. the air filled with the scent of roasted beans and quiet music. I gathered my courage and asked, "Why does nobody invite me anymore? Why am I left out?" He stirred his cup, avoiding my eyes. "You're too sensitive," he said finally. "You always take things the wrong way. People don't want drama at family gatherings." Drama. That word again. To them, my longing for inclusion was nothing more than trouble, noise, disruption. My pain was rewritten as melodrama, my exclusion as my own fault. I sat there staring at the steam rising from my coffee, realizing that even my father, the man who once carried me on his shoulders during family picnics, had joined the chorus. That conversation broke something in me. It was the moment I finally understood. I wasn't fighting misunderstanding. I was fighting choice. They had decided that I no longer belonged, and every excuse, sensitive, dramatic, complicated, was just a mask for that truth. The years rolled on, birthdays blurred into one another, celebrated without me. Holidays passed in silence. My grandparents grew frail, and when they passed, I wasn't told until days later. I went to the cemetery alone, carrying flowers, speaking to the earth because the people above it no longer wanted to hear my voice. And yet, through the pain, I began to find something unexpected. Resilience. Exclusion forced me to search elsewhere for belonging, and slowly, I built a new circle. Friends who called me on holidays, neighbors who invited me for dinner, colleagues who remembered my birthday and baked me a cake. Piece by piece, I discovered that family can be chosen, that love can be found outside the boundaries of blood. The first Christmas I spent with friends, instead of waiting for a call from relatives, was terrifying. I felt guilty, as though I were betraying some unspoken rule. But as we sat around the table, laughing, sharing food, exchanging small gifts, I realized that I hadn't betrayed anything. I had simply stopped betraying myself by waiting for people who would never come. New traditions began to grow. Every Thanksgiving, I cooked a meal with people who wanted to be there. On New Year's Eve, I hosted small gatherings in my apartment, candles glowing, music playing softly, laughter filling the rooms. On my birthday, friends took me out for dinner, and we toasted not just to my life, but to survival, to strength, to the choice of building something new from the ashes of what was lost. Still, the old wounds never fully healed. There are nights when memories return uninvited. My grandmother's warm kitchen, my cousins and I chasing each other through the yard, the long table glowing with candles. I remember the warmth, and then I remember the cold that followed. Nostalgia and grief intertwine until I can hardly tell them apart. But with each passing year, the pain grows quieter. It doesn't vanish, but it no longer defines me. I've learned that being excluded doesn't make me less worthy. Their rejection speaks more about them than it ever did about me. Sometimes I wonder what they say about me when I'm not there. Do they tell themselves I chose to stay away? Do they pretend I was never part of them at all? Maybe that's easier for them, rewriting the story until I vanish entirely. But I know the truth. I was there. I was part of it. And they decided to let me go. The hardest part is accepting that I may never know why. Families rarely admit their cruelty outright. They hide it behind excuses, behind silence, behind the word drama. I used to think I needed an explanation to move on. But now I see that the absence of answers is an answer itself. They didn't care enough to give me one, and so I carry on. On the nights when the ache is strongest, I remind myself of the people who do choose me, who invite me, who make space for me. I light candles for myself. I cook meals with love. I create celebrations that don't depend on anyone else's approval. My relatives may have stopped inviting me, may have treated me as a stranger. But I am not a stranger to myself. I know my worth. I know my heart. And I know that belonging isn't something they can take away from me. It's something I can build again and again, no matter how many times I am pushed aside. One day, maybe, they will look around their crowded tables and see the empty chair where I once sat. Maybe they will feel the absence. Maybe they will wonder what became of me. But by then, I will be too busy living, too busy building my own circle to care. Because family is not about who shares your blood. It's about who shares your heart. And I refuse to let mine go hungry ever again.